She was 12, barefoot, and sobbing in a school hallway, because the principal just called the police on her for stealing a science trophy she won. No one asked her name, no one checked the records, they only saw brown skin and a gold medal. But when the security footage came out, it revealed a truth nobody was ready for. So why did they try to bury it? Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. At Lockridge Preparatory Academy, everything was polished. The marble floors, the gold-trimmed trophies in the front lobby, even the names engraved on the walls, names of alumni who'd gone on to become senators, CEOs, and Olympic medalists. It was the kind of school where children were born into excellence, or at least into the kind of money that could buy its illusion. Amara didn't belong to any of those names. She wasn't enrolled. She didn't wear the pressed blue and gold uniform, or carry a monogrammed iPad in her backpack. Her shoes were too big, hand-me-downs from a shelter donation box, and the only bag she carried held Lysol wipes and floor rags. She was just the maid's daughter. No one ever said her name during announcements. She had never sat in a classroom chair as a student, and no one knew that she could tell you every square of that school from memory, because she had cleaned them, one by one, every afternoon for the past 2 years. Her mother, Rosa, worked in silence, a proud woman who walked with her back straight and her eyes down. She told Amara the same thing every morning. Quiet feet, watch everything, speak only when spoken to. And Amara did. At least until that Wednesday. That morning had started like all the others. Amira had waited by the side exit as her mother signed in. The office staff barely looked up. The security guard gave a half-hearted nod, his eyes glued to the monitor. Rosa tied her apron with care, tucking her keys on one side, a worn photo of Amira's late father on the other. She never complained, but her hands were always sore by sunset. "Sit in the break room," Rosa whispered. "I won't be long." But Amira hated the break room. It smelled like microwaved noodles and loneliness. So instead she wandered. Quietly, of course, like her mother taught her. She drifted past the gym where girls practiced ballet, into the science wing where students tested their 3D printers, and finally into the East Wing, the academic halls. It was always the quietest part of campus, especially before lunch. The classrooms were locked, but one door had been left slightly open, room 114, the chess room. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed faintly. 6 chessboards sat on fold-out tables, neatly aligned. Framed photos of past school champions hung on the far wall. All boys, all white, all smiling in stiff blazers. Amara didn't know their names, but she knew the pieces on the board. Her eyes flicked over them like puzzle pieces she'd seen before. She stepped inside, careful not to let the door slam behind her. She stood in front of the closest table. It called to her, not in some magical, dramatic way, just with a soft, strange certainty. She looked around, empty. Then she sat. Her fingers hovered over the black pieces, cold, smooth plastic warmed by the sun creeping through the blinds. She remembered her father teaching her years ago in their old Bronx apartment. He'd played at the park, near 14 9th Street. Never for money, just pride. He taught her how knights moved in L shapes, and why the queen was the most dangerous piece on the board. "Chess ain't about strength," he used to say, tapping his temple. "It's about who sees further." She touched the pawn, moved it forward. Then another move. Then another. She began whispering the possible combinations under her breath, resetting the board each time. She didn't notice that 10 minutes had passed. Or 20. She didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway. Outside the glass window, a pair of eyes watched her, narrowed, confused. It was Devin Markham, a 7th grader, captain of the Lockridge Chess Club. Son of Bradley Markham, founder of Markham Financial Group, and donor of the school's newest tech lab. Devin was used to being the smartest in the room. He had no idea who the girl was, or why she was using his private set. He entered without knocking. "Hey, that's not for you." Amara jumped, nearly knocking over the board. She stood up too fast, her chair scraping loudly. Devin looked at her like she'd scratched his Tesla. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her voice small. "Who even let you in here?" I was just looking. I'm not touching anything." Devin walked toward the board. Looked down. "You were playing." Amara opened her mouth, then closed it. He scoffed. "Do you even know what a Sicilian defense is?" She didn't answer, but she did. And her silence wasn't from ignorance. Devin sat across from her, You know what? Let's play. Since you like touching stuff that's not yours. She hesitated. What? Scared? She sat down. For 7 minutes, there was silence. Then, Devon began to shift. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing, his movements slower, more deliberate. After 10 moves, he stopped underestimating her. After 15, he was sweating. She executed a queen sacrifice that left him flustered. 3 moves later, she cornered his king. Checkmate, she said softly. Devon stared at the board like it had betrayed him. You cheated. Amara blinked. There's no way. You messed something up. You're just the cleaning lady's kid. Amara stood up. Her throat tightened. She wanted to say something, but no words came. She left the room. Behind her, Devon flipped the board in anger, plastic pieces scattering across the floor. Outside the door, Amara leaned against the wall, her hands trembling, not with fear but with something new. Something fierce. Pride. But as she rounded the corner back to the janitor's closet, 2 teachers were whispering. One of them had seen her. The other frowned. She shouldn't be wandering these halls. They're going to make a big deal of this. You know how some parents get. In that moment, Amara didn't feel victorious. She felt watched, marked. She hadn't just touched the board. She had shaken the wrong kind of silence. What none of them knew was that the game was about to change forever. The next morning, no one mentioned what had happened in room 1. Not Devon. Not the teachers who saw her leave. Not even Rosa, though her shoulders seemed heavier than usual when she tied her apron. It was as if silence itself had a function to protect the boundaries that kept children like Amara in place. No one needed to say anything. The message had already been delivered. Stay where you belong. Amara stayed close to her mother that day. She didn't wander. She didn't peek into classrooms or glance at trophies. She just followed Rosa down empty hallways, dragging a gray mop bucket that squeaked every few feet. The halls still smelled of wax and bleach, but to Amara, everything felt different now. Heavier. The mop water turned brown before lunch. They changed it in the same janitor closet where Amara often sat cross-legged on the tile, flipping through the outdated school newsletters discarded in stacks near the brooms. She liked reading the award announcements even though none of the faces looked like hers. In one issue, a 4th grader won a regional spelling bee. In another, a 6th grader patented a solar-powered pencil sharpener. The pages always glowed with pride, but that pride wasn't for her. It never had been. In the cafeteria, kids lined up for organic chicken sliders and bottled smoothies with names like Brain Fuel and Mango Mind. Amara and Rosa sat in the back corner, near the loading dock, eating cold sandwiches wrapped in foil. No one looked at them. The cafeteria monitors didn't say hello, not out of cruelty, but because to them Rosa and Amara weren't people. They were fixtures, like trash cans or light switches. Amara, Rosa whispered, not raising her eyes from the sandwich. You didn't touch anything again, did you? Amara hesitated. No. A quiet lie, but a necessary one. Rosa looked tired, more tired than usual. Her hands trembled slightly when she took a bite, and Amara noticed for the first time how thin her wrists had become. She worked double shifts during holidays, and never took sick days. At night she massaged her own back with an old rolling pin. Good, Rosa finally said. Because this job matters. You understand? Amara nodded. But her eyes drifted toward the distant corner of the cafeteria where Devon sat, surrounded by his friends. He was laughing, carefree, unbothered. Later in the art wing, Rosa scrubbed paint off the walls where students had splattered their ideas across murals of planets and revolutionaries. Inspire, innovate, imagine. The words painted above the doors now seemed like mockery. Amara rinsed brushes in the utility sink, glancing at a still-drying canvas of a lion painted by a 3rd grader. She wondered if lions ever felt trapped, or if they knew when people pretended not to see them. By mid-afternoon, while the school buzzed with debate team announcements, and the robotics club prepared for an upcoming state fair, Amara found herself outside the faculty lounge. The door was ajar. Inside, 2 teachers chatted while pouring coffee. You hear about Devon? Got beat by a cleaning girl. That's what he's telling people now. She wasn't supposed to be in that room. Right. But still, I mean, how do you get beat by someone like that? Their laughter was sharp. Amara flinched and stepped away. She walked quickly back to the supply closet, heart pounding. Someone like that. The words played in her mind over and over, like she wasn't real. Just a curiosity. A fluke. That night, Back at the small basement apartment, Rosa rented from a distant cousin in Ridgewood, Amara couldn't sleep. The walls were thin, and she could hear the neighbor's television blaring reruns. Her cot, tucked in the corner near the water heater, creaked every time she shifted. Rosa had fallen asleep on the couch, one shoe still on, her cleaning badge resting on her chest. Amara tiptoed to the corner where they kept recycling and trash, looking for a book to read. She often scavenged through old papers for homework pages, or discarded magazines from the school. Tonight, buried under an empty cereal box and crumpled handouts, she found something different. It was tattered and stained. The cover barely clung to the spine, but the gold letters still showed faintly. Chess Tactics for Young Masters. She opened it slowly, careful not to tear the pages. Inside were diagrams, board layouts, arrows showing movement, commentary about traps, and positioning. It was filled with terms like fork, pin, discovered chess. Amara sat on the floor, cross-legged, and began to read by the dim yellow light of the oven. She understood it. Every concept made sense, not because someone had taught her, but because her mind was already tuned to it. She traced the moves on a makeshift board, drawn with chalk on the back of a cereal box. Her fingers moved instinctively. Bishop to e4, knight to c6, sacrifice the rook, set up the trap. An hour passed, then another. She forgot the time. She forgot the teacher's laughter. She forgot Devon. All she saw was the game. But in the silence of that night, with pages spread across the cracked linoleum, and the weight of the world above her, something else flickered inside her chest, something dangerous and bright. She wasn't supposed to touch those pieces. She wasn't supposed to know this game. She wasn't supposed to win. But what if she did? That night, when she found an old torn chess book in the trash, something awakened. By the end of that week, Amara had finished the chess book. Every page, every puzzle, every annotated match. She had even copied entire board diagrams onto the inside of cereal boxes, and practiced each sequence with bottle caps for pieces. Her mother noticed how quiet she had become in the evenings, how Amara's eyes stayed fixed, not on cartoons or drawings, but on invisible maps only she could see.
You all right, baby?
Rosa asked one night, folding rags into a drawer. Amara nodded. Just thinking. Rosa didn't push. In a world that demanded silence from them both, thinking was a luxury. Let the girl think. Back at Lockridge Prep, Amara's movements became even more cautious. After the Devon incident, she avoided room 114, even when the door was cracked open. She stayed away from the cafeteria at peak hours, and she no longer made eye contact with teachers in the hall. But her mind stayed busy, always calculating. By the third week, she had memorized over 20 opening combinations and dozens of endgame traps. She could spot forks in 4 moves, pins in 6, and saw threats before they formed. But none of it mattered outside the walls of her mind. Not in a place like Lockridge, where worth was measured in surnames, test prep scores, and parent donations. No one cared how much she knew, because no one believed she could know it. It wasn't just the staff. It was in the eyes of the students too. They looked through her, sometimes literally stepping around her mop bucket without a word, without apology. When her mother pushed the cleaning cart down the hallway, they walked faster, not out of cruelty, but out of conditioned distance. They had been raised to believe people like Rosa and Amara existed in the periphery, helpful, silent, disposable. In their eyes, Amara was 10 steps behind before she even started walking. But chess was different. Chess didn't care what shoes you wore, or how polished your name sounded. The pieces obeyed only the logic of the board. It was the only place where her mind was free. She began sneaking into the math room after hours. The teacher, Mr. Braxton, never locked his door. His room was stacked with geometric models and complicated problem sets left on whiteboards. Amara used his desk to lay out her makeshift chessboard and review combinations by memory. She timed herself using the second hand on the clock above the chalkboard. Every tick, another move. Then one day she heard someone enter. Amara froze. The door hadn't opened. It was already open. She hadn't noticed. A girl stood in the doorway, pale, with blonde curls tied into a perfect braid, a violin case on her shoulder. It was Gwen Avery, one of the most admired 6th graders in the school. Straight A's. Daughter of a surgeon and a university dean. A regular in the school's brochure photos.
Oh.
Sorry, Gwen said, blinking. Didn't know anyone was in here. Amara jumped up, grabbing her board and bottle caps. But Gwen paused. Wait, is that chess? Amara nodded. Where'd you get that set? I made it. Gwen tilted her head. Curious. You know how to play? Amara hesitated. A little. Gwen walked in slowly. You play for fun? Just learning. Gwen smiled. My brother's on the team. He says nobody ever beats Devin. But he also says Devin's kind of an ass. Amara bit the inside of her cheek. She wasn't used to hearing students talk like that, especially not to her. You wanna play? Gwen asked. Amara froze. Gwen noticed. It's okay, we don't have to, just asking. Amara nodded. Okay. They played 3 games. Amara won all 3. The last one ended in 12 moves. Gwen stared at the board like it had betrayed her. You're really good. Thanks. Where'd you learn that? From a book. In the trash. Gwen blinked. Wait, seriously? Amara nodded again. Gwen didn't laugh. She just said, cool, and started packing her things. That moment was small. So small it could have disappeared into the next hour, like nothing happened. But it stayed with Amara. Gwen hadn't looked at her like she didn't belong. She looked at her like she was real. The next day, Gwen told her brother. The day after that, word reached Devin. And that's when it happened. Devin strolled into room 1114 during the first club meeting of the spring. He was surrounded by the usual crew, upperclassmen in blazers too big for their frames, each one eager to defend their social rank as much as their ELO rating. Amara was there too. Gwen had invited her to watch. She's not supposed to be in here, Devin said flatly, pointing. She's with me, Gwen replied. Devin smirked. You're serious? Her? She beat me. She cheated. No. She didn't, Gwen said. She's good. Devin turned to Amara. You want to play again? Amara didn't answer. He walked over, set the board. Come on. Let's see what you've really got. No made-up names. No excuses. The room grew quiet. Amara sat down. This time the room stayed for the match. Within 6 moves, Amara had gained position. At 10 moves, she had sacrificed a bishop to set up a rook trap. At 13, Devin looked nervous. He tried to rush her, distract her, even coughed loudly after each of her turns. But she stayed locked in, focused, precise.
Move 7.
Checkmate. Gasps in the room. Devin's face turned red. She's been watching us. Stealing tactics. Gwen stepped forward.
Or maybe she's just better.
She's not even in this school. Mara stood up. Quiet. Steady. I'm not trying to take anything, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I just like the game. Then stay in your place, Devin snapped. Silence. Even his friends shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Dorian, the chess coach, who had been standing by the wall unnoticed, finally spoke up. She's welcome here if she plays by the rules. Devin scoffed. We'll see what my dad says. He stormed out. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The next morning, Amara's mother was called into the administrator's office. Rosa, the head of facilities, began, not unkindly. We need to set some boundaries about your daughter wandering the school. She's never caused trouble, Rosa said, trying to stay calm. We've had parent complaints. Some feel uncomfortable with her presence during academic hours. She's with me, Rosa replied, now firmer. It's not about rules, the administrator added. It's about optics. Rosa didn't speak. Her hands were clenched behind her back. She understood exactly what they meant. That evening, Rosa didn't say much. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. Amara stood in the hallway, holding the chess book, unsure if she should hide it. Her mother finally looked up and said one thing. Soft but steady. They're going to try and take this from you. Amara swallowed. But if you love it, don't let them. Until one careless challenge from a smug student revealed everything. The tension from Devin's public loss never truly left the air. It lingered in every hallway, every whispered glance, every awkward silence, when Amara and her mother passed by. Lockridge Prep had a way of smoothing over scandal, but only when the scandal belonged to one of their own. When it came from someone like Amara, they didn't smooth it over. They erased it. By Monday morning, the story had already changed. Devin had let her win. The match was a friendly demonstration, not a real competition. The parents' chat groups were buzzing. Mothers with designer handbags and fathers with law degrees were suddenly experts in damage control. They called it charity embarrassment. A fluke, a stunt, nothing more. But what couldn't be erased was the silence that fell every time Amara entered a room. The kids who used to ignore her now stared. Some out of curiosity, others out of quiet resentment. Her mother noticed it first. Rosa didn't need to hear gossip to understand what was happening. She saw it in the way teachers paused when they passed, in the way the head of facilities avoided eye contact. Rosa had worked long enough among the wealthy to know that the worst things weren't said aloud. They were simply decided. That week, Amara stopped accompanying her mother to certain areas of the school. Rosa told her to stay near the back offices, to help with folding laundry, to avoid the cafeteria. Let them forget, Rosa said quietly one afternoon, wringing out a mop. Silence is safer. But Amara couldn't forget. The game had opened something in her, a restlessness that refused to sit back in the shadows. When she closed her eyes, she didn't see floors or rags or the worn tiles of the janitor's closet. She saw the board, the patterns, the infinite possibilities. Every pawn she imagined had a purpose. Every square was a chance to prove that her mind, though hidden under layers of invisibility, was sharper than they could ever admit. It was that restlessness that brought her back to the cafeteria 3 days later. The chess club was gathered again, but this time, without adults. A circle of students around a lunch table. The board set up between trays of food and half-empty juice boxes. Devin wasn't there. He was still sick according to the rumors, but his best friend Marcus was. Marcus was lanky, smug, and loved by the teachers for his confidence. He was also, conveniently, the school's junior chess champion, winner of the local county meet 2 years in a row. Amara had come in just to drop off her mother's forgotten rag bucket. She didn't plan to stay, but Marcus noticed her immediately. "Well, look who's back," he said, loud enough for the others to hear. "You lose your mop again?" The kids laughed. Amara froze. Gwen, sitting at the edge of the group, frowned. "Marcus, stop."
He grinned. What? I'm just saying, if she's so good, maybe she can give us a lesson. Right?
Devin said she's some kind of prodigy. Amara tried to turn away, but Marcus blocked her path. "Come on, just one game. I have to go," she said softly. He smirked. "Scared?" The word hit like a slap. It wasn't the taunt that hurt. It was the tone. That same tone she'd heard from people who didn't believe she belonged anywhere except behind a mop bucket. Gwen stood up. "If you're so sure she'll lose, what are you afraid of?" The crowd murmured. Marcus gestured toward the board. "Fine. Sit." Amara hesitated, then sat across from him. The crowd leaned in, half expecting her to freeze. The match began. Marcus opened with the king's gambit. Aggressive, flashy, the kind of move that screamed confidence. Mara countered with calm precision, her movements deliberate, her eyes fixed not on him but on the board's unfolding story. 5 moves in, Marcus was still smiling. 10 moves in, the smile had faded. 15 moves in, his hand was shaking slightly every time he reached for a piece. "You studied this?" he asked under his breath. "No," Amara replied softly. "I just see it." By move 20, he was trapped. Amara's rook had cornered his queen, and his king had nowhere to go. The cafeteria fell silent. Marcus looked up at her, not angry, just lost. He couldn't believe it, couldn't process what had just happened. Then, like a reflex, he laughed. She cheated. The word landed like a stone in water, ripples spreading instantly through the crowd. Amara blinked. "I didn't." Marcus stood, knocking over his chair. "You think she really did that on her own? She probably watched videos or something. My dad says those people are good at copying things." "Those people." A few kids laughed awkwardly. Gwen didn't. She crossed her arms. "That's not fair." Marcus turned to her. "You don't get it. This isn't about fair. It's about real players." Amara pushed back her chair. The humiliation burned in her chest. The laughter wasn't loud. It was worse. It was quiet, knowing, the kind of laughter that told her she had stepped too far out of place. She left the cafeteria before the next wave of whispers began. By the time she reached the janitor's closet, her eyes stung. Her mother was there, sorting cleaning supplies. "What happened?" Rosa asked. Amara couldn't answer. She just shook her head and wiped her face. Rosa put down the rags and knelt beside her. "You have to be careful, baby. They don't see you the way I do. They'll twist it." "But I didn't do anything wrong," Amara whispered. "I know." Rosa's voice trembled. "That doesn't mean they'll care." At that same moment, across the building, Marcus was in the principal's office. Not for being cruel, but for complaining. He claimed Amara had been snooping, and using school property without permission. His story was polished, confident, practical. By the time the meeting ended, the staff had decided it would be best if Rosa kept her daughter away from all extracurricular activities. The next morning, a letter waited in Rosa's mailbox. It was folded neatly, stamped with the Lockridge seal. For the comfort of all students and parents, please ensure your daughter remains in designated custodial areas during work hours. Unauthorized access to classrooms or activity spaces will result in disciplinary review. Rosa read it 3 times. Her face didn't change, but her hands began to shake. When she got home that night, she didn't say a word. She just handed Amara the letter and sat on the couch. The silence between them was heavy. "Did you touch the board again?" Rosa asked quietly. Amara hesitated. "Yes." Rosa exhaled, her eyes wet but steady. "Then hold your head up. They can take the board from you, but not what's in here." She tapped Amara's forehead. "They can't clean that away." Amara went to bed early, but she couldn't sleep. She lay awake replaying every move from the game, every word Marcus had said. Those people. It echoed in her mind like a curse. The next day, when Rosa went to work, Amara didn't follow. Instead, she waited outside the school gates, hidden behind the hedges until lunchtime. When the bell rang, she slipped in through the side door, quiet, unseen. In the cafeteria, the chessboard still sat on the table where Marcus had left it. Half the pieces were scattered, some missing entirely. Amara walked up and began to reassemble the board. She played both sides, moving back and forth, recreating the match from memory. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were sharp, move by move. She replayed the humiliation, but this time she took it back. She reclaimed it. When she finished the final move, she whispered, "Checkmate." She didn't realize someone was watching. At the far end of the cafeteria, Miss Ellison, the soft-spoken literature teacher with silver hair and quiet eyes, had been standing with a clipboard, observing. She had seen the entire thing. She didn't speak. Not yet. She simply watched the girl who wasn't supposed to play, but still won. And in that quiet moment, something flickered in her expression. Recognition. Because Miss Ellison had seen brilliance before. Hidden brilliance. The kind the world ignored until it was too late. She turned slowly and walked toward the principal's office, her heart pounding. What came next wasn't praise, it was punishment. Miss Ellison didn't sleep that night. The image of Amara sitting alone in the cafeteria replayed in her mind. The small hands arranging the chess pieces with mechanical precision, the quiet hum of thought that filled the air around her. It wasn't just skill. It was something rare. It was mastery that had no right to exist in a place that never gave her the chance to learn it. By morning, the whispers had already spread through the staff room. "Did you hear? The janitor's kid. Apparently she's been sneaking into classrooms again." "Yeah, playing games, pretending to be some kind of prodigy." "Devon's parents are furious. Can't have her distracting the students." The words sliced through the air like paper cuts. Soft, polite, and cruel. Miss Ellison kept her head down as she poured coffee. She'd worked at Lockridge Prep for 27 years. She had seen the school handle controversy before, but this was different. It wasn't just about rules or trespassing. It was about class, color, and the unspoken boundaries that stitched the place together. By mid-morning, the principal called a meeting. Principal Harden was a man who prided himself on order. He liked his school tidy. No rumors, no disruptions. He leaned forward in his chair as Rosa sat across from him, uniform neat, hands folded. Amara sat beside her, silent, staring at the floor. Harden cleared his throat. "Mrs. Alvarez, we received multiple complaints. Apparently your daughter has been using school property without supervision." "She was helping me clean," Rosa interrupted quietly. "She's always with me." Harden frowned. "This isn't about cleaning. It's about conduct. She's been entering classrooms, engaging with students." "She played a game," Rosa said, voice trembling. "That's all." Harden adjusted his tie. "It wasn't just a game. Students claim she disrupted an academic club. Some even suggested she cheated to win." Rosa blinked. "Cheated? How can she cheat at chess?" Harden sighed. "That's precisely the issue. The students feel she couldn't possibly have outperformed them without external help." Amara finally looked up. "What does that mean?" Harden hesitated. "It means there are concerns about where she learned the game, how she had access to strategy materials, and whether she might have copied from online resources." Rosa stared at him. "She doesn't even have a computer." I understand, Hardin said softly. But perception matters here. The school's environment depends on trust and safety. Parents are upset. There it was. The truth behind the curtain. Parents are upset. That was always the invisible line. Amara clenched her fists under the table. Her throat burned. So I'm in trouble for winning. Hardin leaned back, his voice too calm. You're not in trouble, but we do need to establish boundaries. Effective immediately, Amara will remain with her mother at all times. No classroom visits, no interactions with students, and certainly no club activities. Rosa's lips parted. You can't just… This is non-negotiable, Hardin said, standing. We're not suspending her, Mrs. Alvarez. We're protecting her. And our students. That word, protecting, hung in the air, like poison. When they left the office, Rosa didn't speak. She just walked. Amara followed, the fluorescent lights above, flickering as if even the building disapproved. In the janitor's closet, Rosa finally sank onto a stool. They think you stole something, she said quietly. Something that doesn't belong to you. Amara's voice broke. But I didn't. I know, baby. Rosa reached for her, brushing away a tear with calloused fingers. But it doesn't matter what's true. It matters what they see. And they don't see you. That night, Amara stayed awake again. The chess book lay open beside her, pages frayed from constant use. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. But they didn't silence her thoughts. They sharpened them. She replayed every move she'd ever made, every match, every reaction. And then something new struck her. The game wasn't about moves anymore. It was about perception, about who controlled the narrative. They didn't just beat you on the board. They beat you by convincing everyone you didn't deserve to play. The next morning, Miss Ellison walked into the principal's office unannounced. Hardin, we need to talk. Hardin looked up from his computer. If this is about the janitor's daughter, it is, then I've already handled it. You've silenced it, she replied. Hardin's jaw tightened. Watch your tone, Margaret. I've watched this place long enough, she said. I've seen how you handle things like this. You smooth them over, make them disappear, because the donors might frown. He leaned back. You're emotional. This isn't about race or class. It's exactly about that, she snapped. You think a white child would have been accused of cheating for beating your star student? Enough. Miss Ellison stood firm. You're punishing a child for being extraordinary. Hardin's voice dropped to a whisper. You've got 20 years until retirement, Margaret. Don't throw it away over this. But she didn't back down. Then maybe 20 years of silence was already too long. That afternoon, while Rosa scrubbed the auditorium steps, Miss Ellison found Amara in the hallway. Amara, she said softly, crouching to her eye level. Do you still have that chess book? Amara nodded cautiously. Bring it tomorrow, and meet me in room 212, after the last bell. Don't tell anyone. Amara hesitated. Will I get my mom in trouble? Not if we're careful. The next day, Amara waited until the final bell. The hallways were nearly empty when she slipped into room 212. Miss Ellison was already there, setting up a chessboard on her desk. Sit, she said kindly. For an hour they played. Miss Ellison didn't speak much, just watched the way Amara's hands moved fast, precise, fearless. By the third match, Miss Ellison knew the truth. Amara, she whispered. You don't play like a beginner. You think 5-6 moves ahead. Amara smiled faintly. That's what my dad used to say. Miss Ellison froze. Your father taught you? Before he passed, Amara said, we used to play with bottle caps. He told me to imagine every piece had a story. Miss Ellison felt a lump in her throat. He taught you to see the board differently. Amara nodded. Miss Ellison sat back. They don't understand you because they can't imagine someone like you knowing what they don't. But they're wrong. She reached into her bag and handed Amara a small stack of photocopies. Tournament listings, practice puzzles, strategy breakdowns. Study these, quietly. Don't let anyone see. Amara stared at the papers as though they were sacred. From that day on, they met in secret 3 times a week. Miss Ellison guided her through advanced concepts, tempo control, positional sacrifices, endgame traps. Each time, Amara absorbed everything like a storm absorbing the sea. But Lockridge Prep was a place where secrets didn't stay hidden long. One Thursday afternoon, just as Amara packed her bag, the door opened. Devon stood there, flanked by Marcus, and 2 others. Well, he said, smirking. Guess the rumors were true. Miss Ellison's face hardened. This isn't your concern, Devin. He shrugged. Principal might think otherwise. Tutoring the janitor's kid in his classrooms? Kinda looks like favoritism. Amara's pulse raced. Devin grinned. Don't worry, I'll make sure everyone knows how she's really getting her moves. He left, laughter echoing down the hall. Miss Ellison closed her eyes. They're going to twist this, she whispered. They always do. By the next morning, it had spread again. This time worse. Unfair coaching. Academic misconduct. Breaking school policy. By lunch, Rosa was called into the office again. This time there was no gentle tone, no polite phrasing. The word suspension was used.
Amara wasn't expelled. That would draw attention, but she was banned from all club activities indefinitely. Her mother's employment status was under review.
The school that never acknowledged her existence had suddenly made her infamous. When they walked home that evening, the air was thick and gray. Neither spoke. The chess book stayed clutched to Amara's chest like a secret she refused to surrender. In the distance, the school lights glowed like watchtowers. Bright, distant, untouchable. Rosa finally whispered, "They'll try to erase you, baby." Amara looked up at her mother, tears tracing her cheeks. "Then I'll make them remember me." But one teacher did watch, and she wasn't staying silent anymore. Miss Ellison had never been one for confrontation. She was the type of teacher who wrote encouraging notes in the margins, who baked cookies during finals week, who never raised her voice unless the room had grown too cruel. But watching Amara walk out of the principal's office with her head bowed, carrying the weight of an accusation she didn't deserve, something cracked inside her. It wasn't just anger, it was shame. Shame for the year she'd spent looking the other way while the school quietly buried children, like Amara, beneath praise for others less deserving. Shame for staying silent every time a student of color was labeled disruptive for asking too many questions, while another was called inquisitive for the same curiosity. Shame for every time she knew better and did nothing. Not this time. She began quietly, carefully. First, she requested access to school archives using her department login. Nothing unusual, just a literature teacher, curious about tracking student engagement patterns. That's what she told the tech assistant. Anyway, he smiled and handed her a password reset link, without question. She started with footage, security cameras from the cafeteria, hallway cams near the chess room. Lockridge had high-end surveillance, donated by one of the board of trustees for safety reasons. In this case, it served a very different kind of safety. What she found stunned her. There, in time-stamped clarity, was Amara moving through the chess room, reconstructing games from memory, never coached, never prompted. There was no adult helping her, no friend feeding her moves. She was alone. Again and again, she moved the pieces with quiet precision, pausing to think, then executing multi-move traps that even Mr. Dorian, the chess coach, might not have spotted. Miss Ellison leaned back in her chair. This wasn't just a talented girl. This was a mind that operated in dimensions most adults barely understood. Next, she opened test scores. Amara didn't have formal grades. She wasn't enrolled, but she had been given a few assessment sheets during an after-school reading session last fall. When the club needed an extra hand, Miss Ellison had saved those sheets. The math scores were perfect. Reading comprehension was 2 grades above average. Logical reasoning, nearly flawless. She printed everything. Every screenshot. Every note. Every time-stamped clip. She stored it all in a brown leather file folder she hadn't touched in years, the one labeled Curriculum Exceptions. Then she did something she hadn't done in over a decade. She reached out to her old friend at the National Youth Chess Registry. His name was Lowell Brent, former competitive player turned talent scout. They had met at a conference years ago, back when Miss Ellison still believed the education system could be reformed from the inside. She sent him an email that night. "Lowell, I know this is unusual, but I need you to look at a student. She's not on the books. Her name is Amara Alvarez. No formal coaching, no tournament record, but I'm telling you, this child is gifted, possibly beyond anything I've seen. Please watch the attached footage. Don't ask how I got it. Just tell me if I'm crazy. Margaret." She didn't expect a response until the weekend. He replied in 47 minutes. "Margaret, you're not crazy. This is the most advanced intuitive patterning I've seen from a kid this age in years. Maybe ever. She's not mimicking. She's thinking, predicting. Where has she been hiding?" Lowell. Miss Ellison stared at the screen. That question, "Where has she been hiding?" burned in her chest. Because the answer wasn't that Amara had been hiding. It was that the system had never been looking. The next morning, Miss Ellison arrived early. She made 12 copies of the file, locking the originals in her classroom cabinet. She left one on Principal Hardin's desk, unsigned, unmarked, just a file labeled Amara Alvarez, documentation. She didn't include a cover letter. He'd know exactly what it was. But she knew better than to think that facts alone would save Amara. Not here. That afternoon, she was summoned to the office. Hardin's expression was unreadable when she entered. The folder lay unopened on the desk. "I assume this is your doing?" he asked flatly. "I collected facts, that's all." Hardin folded his hands. "You're interfering." "I'm advocating." He leaned forward. "You don't understand the politics of this, Margaret. This isn't just about a game. This is about a perception problem." "You mean the perception that a brown child doesn't belong in your list of top performers?" "I mean the perception that rules were broken. Unauthorized use of space. Coaching without clearance. You're risking your pension over a janitor's daughter." Miss Ellison didn't blink. "No, I'm using my pension to protect a child who deserves better." Hardin stood up. "Then you'd better be ready for the fallout." She was. But it came faster than she expected. The next morning a notice went out. "Effective immediately, Miss Margaret Ellison will be placed on administrative review pending investigation into breaches of academic protocol." They'd suspended her for helping a child. The staff room buzzed with quiet shock. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew the punishment wasn't for breaking policy. It was for breaking silence. Rosa heard about it during lunch. A cafeteria aide passed her the news like a secret too hot to hold. She stood frozen in the kitchen, her hand still holding a sponge, eyes wet. When she told Amara that evening, the girl barely spoke. "They punished her for helping me?" Amara asked softly. Rosa nodded. "But she's a teacher." Rosa's voice cracked. "That's not what matters here." Amara looked down at the folder. Miss Ellison had secretly passed to her earlier, filled with game diagrams, strategy notes, and the contact card of someone named Lowell Brent. At the bottom was a scribbled message: "You don't need their permission to be brilliant." The words pulsed like a drumbeat in her chest. She wasn't just being silenced. She was being erased. And now the only person who had dared to speak for her, to see her, was gone. But Rosa noticed something that night. As Amara stared at the file, her daughter's face wasn't broken. It wasn't defeated. It was still focused, like she was studying the board again. Rosa sat beside her. "What are you thinking?" Amara whispered, "If I'm not allowed to play here, I'll play somewhere they can't stop me." Rosa hesitated. "They'll come harder next time." "I know. And you'll be alone." Amara turned. Not if someone's watching. But revealing that truth would cost Miss Ellison more than she ever imagined. The state tournament was just 2 weeks away, and the entire school buzzed with it. Flyers on lockers, chess clocks ticking in every classroom corner, and announcements echoing over the intercom about final qualifiers. Lockridge Prep prided itself on representation. Every year they sent 2 or 3 of their best students to compete. This year was supposed to be no different, except Amara's name wasn't on the list. It should have been. She had defeated the junior champion in a public game, bested multiple club members in recorded matches, and proven her abilities in front of half the student body. But when the Regional Chess Federation released the preliminary roster, Amara Alvarez didn't exist on the page. Not as a player, not even as an alternate. There was no denial letter, no rejection, just absence. A ghosting written in official ink. Rosa found out before Amara did. The news came from Gwen's mother, a librarian who had quietly rooted for Amara since the cafeteria game. She'd seen the official bulletin while printing out her own daughter's registration details. The moment she noticed Amara's absence, her face tightened. When she casually inquired at the front desk, the reply was short and hushed. "She's not an official student. Only enrolled participants can represent Lockridge." Back home that night, Rosa broke the news gently. "They're saying you can't go." Amara looked up from her notes. "Why not?" "They say it's because you're not registered." Amara blinked. "But I know." "No, I mean, I played. I beat Marcus. I've done everything they asked." "They're moving the goalposts, baby." Amara stared at the ceiling for a long time, her mind racing through every position on the chessboard that now felt rigged. When Miss Ellison heard what happened, her hands went cold. She called the regional tournament office and spoke with an assistant who stumbled over every answer. "Yes, we received the school's nominations. Yes, we follow protocol. No, we don't make exceptions unless the school requests them. So it was Lockridge. They hadn't even tried. And that was the real answer. Not paperwork. Not deadline. Fear. The school wasn't afraid Amara would lose. They were afraid she'd win. Because if she did, they'd have to explain how a janitor's daughter, with no formal training and no private coach, outplayed their best. They'd have to explain how a girl with no record, no rank, no permission, had outthought the children of legacy donors and board members. They'd have to explain how they missed it, or worse, ignored it. And that was a story they couldn't afford to tell. Miss Ellison sat alone in her apartment that night, the city lights flickering outside her window, her hands resting on a chessboard she hadn't touched in years. She thought of Amara's face, calm, brilliant, constantly calculating. Then she opened her laptop and pulled up the tournament rules. She read them. Twice. There was a clause. A loophole. So thin, it barely qualified as a possibility. But it was there. Any participant could register under a sponsoring educational institution outside their own, if their primary institution declined to nominate them, provided they were formally recognized as a student by the sponsor. That word, recognized, sparked something dangerous in her chest. She looked at the wall across from her desk, where a faded certificate hung. The Ellison Learning Cooperative, Approved Community Education Center, INDECTIC. Years ago, she'd created it to teach adult literacy classes in the neighborhood. The permit had never been revoked. Just shelved. Forgotten. But now, it had purpose. The next day, Miss Ellison returned to Lockridge despite her suspension. She wasn't wearing her usual tweed. She wore black slacks and a soft gray blouse, the kind of outfit people associated with lawyers or coordinators. Her walk was different too. Not hesitant, not patient, deliberate. She waited by the back gate until the bell rang, knowing Rosa would exit with her cart at precisely 3:15. "Rosa," she said, gently tapping her arm. Rosa flinched, startled. "Margaret, are you okay?" they said. "I need 10 minutes. Just 10. Amara stepped out from behind the storage door, watching. Miss Ellison crouched to her level. "I found a way in. Not through them. Through me." Amara's eyes narrowed. "You mean the school?" "No. My old cooperative. It's still active. If I register you as a student in my program, you can enter under that name. It's legal. Just barely. But it counts." Rosa looked unsure. "Will they find out?" "They might. But if we wait for permission, she'll never play again." Rosa hesitated. "And what happens if they do find out?" Miss Ellison smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Then I'm finished here." "But I already was." She handed them a small packet, application papers, a schedule of practice sessions, a single tournament entry form with Amara Alvarez, Ellison Learning Cooperative typed in bold. Amara stared at the form. For the first time, her name wasn't next to a caution or a warning. It was beside the word participant. Rosa nodded. If she's going to play, she's going to do it right. That night, Amara filled out the form with shaking hands. The following week, Miss Ellison filed it with the regional office, stamped notarized, and backed by a legal affidavit. No fanfare. No press release. Just a quiet submission in a system built to keep girls like Amara out. When the revised tournament list was posted the next day, buried on page 4 beneath the names of elite academies and magnet programs, there it was. Amara Alvarez, Ellison Learning Cooperative. But Gwen noticed something strange during lunch. Marcus and Devin were huddled in the corner staring at a printout. Their faces were twisted, not in surprise but in fury. "She's on the list," Marcus said, low and bitter. Devin clenched his jaw. "How?" They flipped the page again and again. The name was there. Official. Registered. But beneath it, in faint print, was a small asterisk. Pending verification. Marcus smirked. "All we have to do is make a call." Devin nodded slowly. "Let's see how long she stays on the board." The morning of the tournament, the sky hung low with a soft gray overcast, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Amara stood in front of the hallway mirror in the borrowed apartment of Miss Ellison's friend, a retired librarian named Patrice, who had quietly offered her space for the weekend. The room was quiet, filled only with the faint sound of traffic and the hum of a heater. Amara smoothed the sleeves of her collared shirt, 3 sizes too big, and adjusted the clip-on navy tie. The clothes belonged to Patrice's grandson, who had outgrown them years ago. The shoes pinched, the shirt cuffs swallowed her wrists, and the blazer smelled faintly of mothballs and peppermint. But to Amara, it felt like armor. Miss Ellison pinned a small name tag on her chest. Maria Alvarez, ELC. The pseudonym wasn't far from her real name. Just enough to slide past suspicion. "You ready?" Miss Ellison asked. Amara met her eyes in the mirror. "No. But I'm going anyway." The tournament was held at Westbridge Civic Center, a gleaming glass-paneled complex, where youth competitions were usually limited to private school elites. As Amara walked through the double doors, her heart pounded against her ribs like a drum. Her mother walked beside her, clutching her old purse like it might be taken away. Miss Ellison trailed behind them, watching every glance, every whisper. Inside the atrium, folding tables stretched across the room, each one crowned with a board and 2 clocks. Dozens of children in polished uniforms paced around, practicing openings on travel sets or being coached by stern men in suits. Their parents sipped lattes and exchanged names like currency. Riley's with Baldwin Academy. "My son just ranked top 15 in the district. We're hoping for Harvard West." No one looked at Amara. No one expected to, which was exactly why she was dangerous. When she approached the check-in table, the volunteer flipped through the registration binder. "Name?" she asked without looking up. "Maria Alvarez." Amara answered. The woman scanned the list, found the name, and paused briefly at the sponsoring institution, Ellison Learning Cooperative. "First rounds in room C. Board 17. You're white." Amara nodded, took the slip, and walked away. Just like that. She was in. No questions, no alarms. The first match was against a boy from Lincoln Hill Charter. He was older, with slicked back hair, and a jacket covered in patches from previous wins. He barely looked at her, made his first move without a word. The match lasted 15 minutes. Amara dismantled him piece by piece, not with aggression, but with a quiet efficiency that left him blinking in disbelief. When she announced checkmate, he simply stared at the board. "You're Maria?" he asked, voice thin. Amara nodded. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She stood, signed her sheet, and left the table. Miss Ellison watched from the edge of the room, arms crossed, heart pounding. That was only round 1. By the end of the 3rd round, the room was buzzing. "Who's the girl in the blazer?" "She beat Kyle from Crestview. She's listed as Ellison Co-op." "What is that? A homeschool?" Even the officials began to whisper. It wasn't just that she was winning. It was how she was winning. Her games were clean, elegant, brutal when needed, but never reckless. She predicted her opponent's lines before they even saw the traps coming. She sacrificed pieces with the cold confidence of someone who understood not just the game, but the player. By the lunch break, she was through. Outside, Amara sat on the concrete steps with her mother, unwrapping peanut butter sandwiches from wax paper. Rosa didn't speak much. She just watched her daughter, the same girl she used to cradle on buses, the same girl she once taught to sleep through sirens. "Do you think they know yet?" Amara asked. Rosa shook her head. "Does it matter?" "Maybe. Maybe it matters more if they don't know," Rosa said. "Because that means your moves are louder than your name." Inside, 2 parents approached the check-in desk. One of them held a phone open, showing a photo of Amara. "Are you sure this is Maria Alvarez?" the mother asked. "Because she looks exactly like a girl from Lockridge Prep who was banned from competition." The volunteer frowned. "We verified her this morning. She's registered under a different school. She's not supposed to be here," the father added, voice tight. "I'll flag it to the head judge," the volunteer said. By the 5th round, Amara faced a top 10 seed, a boy named Braxton King, whose father was a regional board member and whose coach wore a suit sharper than most lawyers. Before the match, Braxton leaned across the table and muttered, "You're not even supposed to be in this room." Amara looked him dead in the eye. "Then let's find out." The match was grueling, the longest of the day. Amara played slow, patient. Braxton kept trying to bait her into early trades. She declined each one, inching her pieces forward like a rising tide. Midway through the game, Braxton started shaking his head, annoyed. He accused her of stalling. Twice, he asked the judge to check her notes. There were none, just her eyes, burning holes into the board. On move 43, she sacrificed her queen. Gasps echoed from the spectators. Braxton smiled, prematurely. 2 moves later, she slid her rook across the file and whispered, "Maid in 3. He blinked. "What?" She didn't repeat it. 3 moves later, the game was over. Amara stood, hands steady, and signed her sheet. Across the room, a man watched her. Dark suit, sharp eyes, hands behind his back. He wasn't a parent. He was a representative from the State Chess Federation, sent after someone called in a complaint. The man approached the official table and leaned down. "We may have an eligibility issue. Pull her records." Miss Ellison saw the conversation from across the room. She walked over, calm but firm. "Is there a problem? We've received word that this player may be competing under false credentials." Miss Ellison's voice didn't flinch. "Maria Alvarez is registered under my program. All paperwork was submitted and verified." The man narrowed his eyes. "And you are?" "Margaret Ellison, her instructor, and founder of the Ellison Learning Cooperative." He hesitated, then turned to the official. "Get her tournament file." Miss Ellison handed it over herself. "Everything is in order," she said. Still, the man flipped through it like he was hoping something would fall out. Something that would justify removing a quiet black girl from the table she wasn't supposed to sit at. But the file was clean. He looked up. "We'll allow her to continue, for now." Miss Ellison said nothing, just turned and walked away, her hands now shaking. That evening, the final pairings for the championship round were posted. Amara Alvarez, E.L.
Varvers.
Devin Markham, Lockridge Preparatory. She stared at the paper. For a moment, everything inside her fell still. The name she hadn't heard in weeks. The boy who humiliated her, tried to erase her. The son of the man who had called Rosa's staff instead of a person. The face of everything the system protected. He was her final opponent. Miss Ellison stepped beside her, reading the names. "It was always going to be him," she said. Rosa, standing behind them, didn't speak. She just placed a hand on Amara's back. "You don't have to win to prove anything," she said quietly. Amara nodded. "I know." But in her eyes something cold and exact had formed. Not anger. Not fear. Purpose. As they walked away from the board list, a judge whispered into his headset, "She's going to need to verify ID before this match." The response crackled through his earpiece. "Understood. We'll confirm before she sits." Tomorrow's game wasn't just the final. It was going to expose everything. The morning of the final match, Amara woke before the sun. Outside the small apartment, the city was still. A heavy silence hovered in the air, as if the world knew what was about to unfold. Rosa stood in the kitchen heating leftover rice and eggs, her hands moving slowly, deliberately, while Miss Ellison reviewed final notes for the match, though both women knew the real battle had already begun. Inside Amara's chest, two feelings warred, fear and fire. But she couldn't let either show. She dressed in the same oversized blazer and tie, tightening them like armor. When Rosa helped pin her name tag, Maria Alvarez, she hesitated. "You sure you want to keep this name on you?" Rosa asked. Amara looked in the mirror. "They already know who I am. I want them to say it." Rosa smiled, proud, and deeply afraid. By 9:00 a.m., Westbridge Civic Center buzzed with an energy that had nothing to do with chess. Security guards paced along the hallways. Officials whispered near exit doors. More adults than usual filled the viewing area, some holding phones, others holding back their opinions. Barely. Word had gotten out. Not just among players or parents, but online. Somehow, someone had leaked it. Screenshots of Amara's pairing with Devin had circulated the night before on a private parents group chat from Lockridge. By morning, they had spread to social media, Twitter threads, Reddit boards, even local blogs. A headline from a chess enthusiast site read, "Unranked mystery girl facing Lockridge Prodigy, who is Maria Alvarez." Another read, "Who let the maid's daughter in?" But it wasn't just curiosity. The tone had shifted from wonder to accusation. By noon, new headlines surfaced. "Imposter in the tournament. Unverified entry, rocks youth chess finals. Elite competition breached by unauthorized player. No mention of her brilliance. No mention of her wins. No mention of racism. Just the suggestion that something was wrong. Illegitimate. Threatening." By 1:07 p.m., the tournament sponsors had already begun pulling their branding from the event. Banners were taken down. One of the scholarship fund booths quietly folded up and left the building. A press release from a prominent chess nonprofit. "We uphold the highest standards of entry integrity. We do not support violations of protocol, no matter how well-intentioned." Miss Ellison read it on her phone and nearly dropped it. "They've made her the problem," she said bitterly. Not the rules, not the silence. At the venue, tournament officials approached Amara minutes before the match. "We need to verify your ID," the head official said, clipboard in hand. Miss Ellison stepped forward. "She's registered under my cooperative." All documents were submitted and cleared. The man didn't flinch. "We received a formal challenge this morning. Her opponent's sponsor is requesting identity verification. If she cannot provide official school ID or documentation proving enrollment in your program, she will be disqualified." Rosa's voice cracked. "She's not even 10. She doesn't carry ID." Amara spoke quietly. "You already have my paperwork." The man sighed. "It's about optics now. We need something more." Amara pulled out the only thing she had, the photocopy of her registration form, signed and notarized. But the official waved it off. "This won't be enough under pressure. Not with cameras here." Only then did they look up. Camera crews had arrived. Reporters from local channels were lining the lobby. Some from regional news outlets, even a few with lenses large enough to suggest national interest. The image of a young brown-skinned girl in an oversized blazer, standing across from a white Prodigy, had already taken shape. The narrative was writing itself, and Amara wasn't holding the pen. "They're going to call it cheating," Rosa whispered. "Again. They're going to call it a scandal," Miss Ellison muttered. "And no one's going to say what this really is." "Racism?" Amara asked. "Control." Despite the chaos, the match was allowed to proceed pending further review. The chairs were set. Devin walked in, surrounded by two adults, his coach and his father Bradley Markham, whose face looked like it had never once been told no. He didn't glance at Amara, just adjusted his son's collar, whispered something in his ear, and took a seat behind him. The moment Amara sat, dozens of phones were raised. Flash. Flash. Whisper. The match began. The room was quiet, too quiet. Devin opened with the Queen's Gambit. Bold. Predictable. Amara didn't blink. She countered with the Nimzo Indian defense, a line she had studied for hours. Every move she made came not from memory, but instinct sharpened by experience. Humiliation, silence, and resistance. By move 10 she had control of the center. By move 14 Devin's knight was trapped. Whispers erupted behind them. By move 18, Amara made a sacrifice. Bishop for pawn. That stunned even the judge. Bradley Markham stood up. "This is a farce," he muttered. "Sit down," said a parent behind him. "Let them play." But it was never going to be just a game. Not with the cameras. Not with the headlines already written. Not when a girl like Amara was never supposed to sit at this table. At move 22, Devin miscalculated. Amara punished him. Quietly, without flinching. At move 26 she moved her queen and softly said, "Shh." Devin's face turned red. He stared at the board, lips tight. He refused to resign. They played on. 4 more moves. Amara controlled every square. Final move. Rook to f8. Checkmate. It was over. The room didn't cheer. It didn't clap. It held its breath. And then chaos. Bradley Markham stood. "This match is invalid. Her enrollment is a fraud. She is not a licensed participant." Reporters surged forward. Questions flew like arrows. "Are you really a student at Ellison Cooperative? Did you lie to enter the tournament? Did your mother help you cheat?" Rosa pulled her close. But the officials didn't protect them. They huddled in corners. They whispered about damage control. Miss Ellison stepped forward. "She won. Fairly. Legally. According to the rules you printed." A man from the Federation shook his head. "This isn't just about the rules. It's about the narrative now." And that was the truth. The unspoken spine of every institution Amara had ever walked through. They didn't care how good she was. They cared that she didn't fit the story they were trying to tell. By evening, Amara's face was all over the internet. Some comments praised her. "This girl's a genius." Others were cruel. "Affirmative action chess. Play your position, not ours." If her mom's a maid, who taught her strategy? The worst weren't even direct. They were polite. Soft racism wrapped in academic language. Great story, but let's not pretend brilliance can come from anywhere. Sponsors withdrew. The State Federation announced a formal review of the final. Lockridge issued a statement distancing themselves from the entire event. And Amara? She stayed silent. No interviews. No tears. Just a chessboard in her lap as she sat in her borrowed room staring at the final position she'd used to win. The queen. The knight. The rook. all working together, all underestimated. She replayed the match in her mind. Every move, every insult, every camera flash. And then she asked the one question that none of the newspapers did. What if I hadn't won? Because she knew in her bones, the outrage wasn't about victory. It was about who dared to win. Her face was everywhere, but not her side of the story. The morning after the chaos, Lockridge Prep was surrounded by news vans. The marble gates that once symbolized prestige now looked like walls guarding secrets. Reporters shouted questions at every staff member who dared to step outside, cameras flashing like judgment. Inside, the headmaster's office was a fortress of denial. Principal Harden sat behind his oak desk, flanked by 2 board members. They rehearsed statements, not apologies. No comment. Under investigation. We support diversity in all forms. The words were polished, meaningless, safe. Outside those walls, the world was already talking. And not the way Lockridge expected. Within 24 hours, a shaky cell phone video of the final match appeared on TikTok. It showed Amara's last move, the silent, confident slide of her rook across the board, followed by the stunned look on Devon's face. Someone had captioned it. She wasn't supposed to play, but she did, and she won. The video exploded. Thousands of comments flooded in within hours. This girl's composure is unreal. She's a prodigy. You can see it in her eyes. Imagine being that good, and still being called a fraud. The hashtags followed: Chess Girl, Amara Alvarez, Let Her Play, Maid's Daughter Moves Mountains. What the local press had buried, social media unearthed. Every clip, every whispered insult, every camera angle someone had secretly captured. It all surfaced. The truth could no longer hide in school corridors. On Twitter, journalists who had once ignored community stories began threading the timeline. One wrote, 9-year-old girl banned from chess club, beats private school champion. Accused of cheating because her mother's a janitor. Sound familiar? By noon, celebrities had started retweeting it. A famous actress added, genius has no uniform. An athlete known for his activism posted, if you have to erase her to protect your system, maybe the system's broken. Within 2 days, Amara's face was everywhere. But this time it wasn't for outrage. It was for inspiration. But while the world cheered, Lockridge stayed silent. No apology, no correction, no acknowledgement. The administration even sent a letter home to parents reminding them of the importance of privacy during sensitive investigations. Behind those words lay fear. The fear of losing donors, the fear of exposure, the fear of Amara's truth. In the small apartment that night, Rosa sat on the couch scrolling through her phone. Her hands trembled. News anchors debated whether Amara had been treated unfairly, and talk show hosts used her name like a symbol. Some were kind, some turned her into a headline, not a person. Amara sat on the floor beside her, holding the chessboard Miss Ellison had given her. Why are they still angry? She asked quietly. Rosa looked up. People don't like being reminded of what they pretend isn't real. What's that? That the world isn't fair, but sometimes a child can expose it better than any grown-up. Miss Ellison, meanwhile, had been fielding calls non-stop. Journalists, advocacy groups, even former students. Some praised her courage. Others warned her she'd crossed a line. You've made the school a target, one board member hissed over the phone. Do you realize what you've done? Yes, she said, her voice calm. I told the truth. She hung up before he could respond. Then she sat at her desk and watched the same video everyone else had, the one of Amara's final move. She paused it right before the rook fell into place. In that frame, Amara looked like everything the world tried to erase: quiet, brilliant, undeniable. Across the ocean, that same clip reached a hotel room in Berlin. A man in his 60s sat watching it on a small laptop. His name was Avery Coates, America's first black international chess master, long retired, long forgotten by the media that once celebrated him. He leaned forward, studying the girl's movements. There was something familiar in her precision, the way she looked at the board as though it spoke a language only she could hear. He replayed the clip 3 times. Then he whispered to himself, she sees the whole board. He clicked contact. While the internet continued to roar, Amara stayed inside. Rosa had turned off the Wi-Fi for a day to stop the reporters from tracking their IP address. After someone leaked their location, every knock on the door made Rosa flinch. Every buzz of the phone made her brace for more bad news. But amid the noise, something else began to form. A quiet digital movement that didn't need permission. High schoolers began organizing online tournaments in Amara's name. Community centers posted flyers that read, "Every child deserves a board." A local black-owned bookstore put a sign in their window, "Brains don't belong to classrooms alone." And one afternoon, as Rosa returned from work, she found a box waiting by their door. No name, just a label. For Amara. Inside were two things: a professional wooden chess set and a letter. "Dear Amara, you don't know me, but I saw your match. I saw your grace when they doubted you and your strength when they mocked you. Don't let their noise drown your genius. They can't take what you've already earned. Keep playing. The board is yours. AC." Rosa didn't recognize the initials, but Miss Ellison did. When she arrived later that night, she saw the note and froze. "AC," she whispered. "Avery Coates." "The chess player?" Rosa asked. Miss Ellison nodded. "He's a legend, and if he's watching, everything's about to change." That weekend, Amara's story hit the global news cycle. Not just entertainment shows, but BBC, CNN, and even Le Monde. The narrative was no longer about an imposter. It had become about injustice. Clips of Miss Ellison defending Amara circulated everywhere. In one interview, she said simply, "You can't erase brilliance by changing the name on the roster." It was short, it was sharp, and it became a rallying cry. At the same time, the pressure on Lockridge escalated. Parents who had once defended the administration began demanding answers. Donations froze. One of the sponsors withdrew completely, issuing a public statement: "We cannot fund an institution that punishes talent for being inconvenient." Principal Hardin tried to contain the fire. He called emergency meetings, wrote emails filled with legal phrasing and half-truths. But the story was too big now. You couldn't silence something that had already gone viral. At home, Amara still hadn't spoken to the press. When one reporter caught them outside their building and asked, "Amara, what do you want people to know about you?" she looked straight at the camera and said softly, "I just wanted to play for my mom." That line became a headline across the world. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't political. It was human. And that's what made it impossible to twist. By the following morning, an email appeared in Miss Ellison's inbox. It came from an unfamiliar address, but the subject line froze her breath. "Chess Girl Inquiry from Avery Coates." She opened it with trembling hands. "Ms. Ellison, I've seen your student. She reminds me of the reasons I stopped playing, and the reasons I might start again. If she's willing, I want to meet her. Tell her the board isn't closed. It's just waiting for the right player." Miss Ellison printed the email and took it straight to Rosa and Amara that evening. When she read it aloud, Rosa covered her mouth. Amara just sat still, blinking, like her mind was catching up to what her heart already knew. "He wants to meet me." Miss Ellison smiled through tears. "No, Amara. He wants to mentor you." For the first time since the scandal broke. Amara laughed, a small quiet laugh that carried relief, disbelief, and hope, all at once. Rosa pulled her close, whispering, "You see, Misha, they tried to bury you, but they didn't know you were a seed." Amara looked at the chessboard in front of her. The same one she used to play on the floor while her mother scrubbed classroom floors. The same one that had started it all. Her fingers rested on the queen. This time she wasn't afraid to move it. And then a surprise call came from a chess legend watching from overseas. When Avery Coates stepped onto American soil again. It had been 17 years since his last public appearance. The last time he stood in front of cameras, he had been 41, wearing a tailored suit, accepting an award he hadn't even wanted. That night, he smiled politely, while reporters praised his discipline and intellect, ignoring the fact that his name had been left off invitations for a decade. Before that, ignoring how many rooms he'd entered where people assumed he was the driver. He'd walked away from it all the next year. No press release, no farewell match, just silence. Until now. Because this time, it wasn't about him. It was about a girl who reminded him what it meant to think 3 moves ahead just to be seen. A girl who'd been denied before she ever sat down. A girl who played not to win trophies, but to protect the one person who'd protected her. Amara. He watched the video of her final match 5 more times on the flight over. Not for the outcome. He already knew how it ended. He was watching her posture, her poise, the way she didn't flinch, even as the crowd around her shifted from doubt to disgust to disbelief. She played like the game was the only thing she trusted. He remembered that feeling too well. The day he arrived in New York, The media swarmed him the moment he left the airport. Why now? Is this a political statement? What do you think of the controversy? He said only one thing. No one can silence this kind of mind. I've seen it before. I'm not letting it vanish again. That quote spread like wildfire. By the time he reached the small apartment in Ridgewood where Amara lived, there were 6 news vans parked down the block, and someone had spray-painted "Champion Lives Here" across the wall near the stairwell. Avery Coates knocked quietly. Rosa answered, wide-eyed.
Mr. Coates? She whispered.
He nodded. Call me Avery. Amara stood behind her, clutching her chest set, her shoulders tense. He noticed the way she stayed half hidden behind her mother. A reflex, not fear, just habit. He crouched slightly, hands open. I watched your game, Amara, he said softly. You didn't just win, you commanded the board. Amara didn't say anything at first. Then, they said I shouldn't have been there. Avery tilted his head. I spent most of my life in rooms where they said the same thing. He glanced at Rosa. May I speak with her for a moment? Rosa nodded, slowly. If she wants to. They sat across from each other on the floor, chessboard between them. Avery didn't set the pieces. He let her do it. Let's play, he said, but not to win. Let's see how you think. What followed wasn't a match. It was a conversation without words. Move after move, Amara revealed her intuition, her ability to absorb patterns, her instinct to sacrifice early, her refusal to play safe even when every voice in the world had told her to shrink. Avery smiled halfway through. You see the whole game. Not just the moves. That's rare. It's not something I can teach you. But I can teach you how to make the world hear it. Amara blinked. How? He reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. This is an official invitation to the Westbridge Open, a nationally ranked youth event in 3 weeks. It's not just local. It's streamed. It's watched. And if you sit at that table, no one can ignore you again. Amara stared at the paper. Her fingers hovered just above it. I'm not asking you to play for them, Avery said. I'm asking you to play for the kids like you who haven't even touched a board yet. Amara whispered, what if I mess up? He leaned closer. You already won the moment they tried to make you disappear. The rest is just moves. Miss Ellison arrived minutes later, her eyes red from a morning meeting at Lockridge. They're trying to distance themselves further, she told Rosa. The board sent out a private memo. They say this is about keeping the school out of controversy. But what they mean is they want to make her someone else's responsibility. Avery stood. Good. Because she was never theirs to own. But the backlash came swiftly. The moment news broke that Avery Coates had personally endorsed and would mentor Amara, the school board held an emergency session. They didn't issue a statement. They leaked one. An anonymous quote appeared in a local paper. While we support all students, we cannot endorse unauthorized activities that bypass institutional structure. External mentorship without school oversight sets a dangerous precedent. Translation. A black man from outside their world had dared to lift up a girl they'd tried to bury, and they didn't like losing control. Parents started calling again. Some praised the school for staying above the drama. Others warned about attention seekers damaging the school's image. One even emailed the school administration directly. If you continue allowing staff to promote this girl's narrative, we'll pull our funding. It's not her win we're worried about. It's the message it sends. That message was clear. A maid's child isn't supposed to rewrite the script. At Lockridge, Gwen Avery, still one of the only students openly supporting Amara, was pulled aside by a guidance counselor. You're a great student, they told her. But be careful who you align yourself with. This may follow you into your recommendation letters. Gwen went home that night and wrote a full essay titled Silence is Not Neutral. She posted it on her blog. It was shared over 100. Meanwhile, Amara and Avery trained every day. They met in libraries, back rooms of community centers, even in the quiet lobbies of hotels that offered space. Rosa went to work early and came home late, but always made sure Amara had dinner, a ride, and a moment to rest. Sometimes they practiced in silence. Other times, Avery told her stories about tournaments in the Deep South where he'd been forced to play in separate rooms, about matches he won where no one shook his hand, about being the only black player in a room of champions who treated him like an intruder. They couldn't handle my mind, he said once. So they attacked everything else, my tone, my clothes, my presence, just like they're doing to you. Amara nodded. So what did you do? He looked her in the eye. I stayed on the board until they couldn't deny me. The Westbridge Open approached fast. A new flyer went out. This time, Amara's name wasn't buried. It was printed in bold. Spiel guest Amara Alvarez, mentored by Grandmaster Avery Coates. But under that flyer, a counter-movement had begun. Anonymous emails warned event organizers of potential political disruption. Parents complained that the event was becoming less about chess, more about headlines. A petition started circulating to disqualify players who violated prior tournament protocols. Amara read it all, then folded the papers and whispered,
They're scared.
Miss Ellison nodded. Of what? Amara looked at the board. That I'll win again, this time with everyone watching. But not everyone wanted that spotlight lit again, especially the school board. The letter arrived on a Wednesday, printed on heavy ivory paper that smelled faintly of money and polished furniture. Rosa found it tucked into her work locker, folded in an envelope, stamped with the Lockridge Prep crest. She wiped her hands on her apron before opening it, already sensing it wasn't good news. Dear Mrs. Alvarez, given the recent circumstances surrounding your daughter's participation in external competitions, the Board of Trustees has convened to review her status. While the administration recognizes Amara's intellectual promise, we must prioritize the integrity of our institution. We are prepared to extend a full scholarship and continued enrollment for Amara, provided she refrains from further participation in non-sanctioned tournaments and any public engagement related to these events. Sincerely, Principal Douglas Hardin. Rosa read it 3 times. Every line tightened around her chest, like a rope. It wasn't a gift, it was a leash. That night, when she showed it to Amara and Miss Ellison at the kitchen table, the silence that followed was louder than words. The single lamp flickered over the letter like a spotlight on something poisonous. Amara's hands trembled as she read. They're offering to pay for my school. Miss Ellison's voice was careful. They're offering to own your silence. Rosa exhaled. They're scared, baby. Not proud. Scared. They want to make sure you don't remind them what they did. Amara frowned. If I take it, I can still go to school. If I don't, Rosa finished the sentence for her. If you don't, they'll shut the doors that were never really open. The air felt thick. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space where courage should have been easy. Miss Ellison reached across the table. You need to think about what you want most, not what they want you to choose. Amara's voice came out small. But what if I want both? That question sat between them, like a blade. Miss Ellison stared at the letter again, remembering the board meeting she'd attended years before when another gifted student, a black boy with perfect scores, had been denied a scholarship because his mother worked as a cafeteria server. The excuse had been limited funding. The truth was that Lockridge's generosity was always selective. She spoke quietly. Every system that's built on silence counts on you wanting both. That's how they win. Amara lowered her head. If I don't sign it, they'll call me ungrateful. Rosa touched her shoulder. If you do sign it, you'll forget how to speak. The next day, Rosa delivered Amara to school as usual. The building looked the same. Perfect hedges, spotless hallways, but inside everything felt different. Teachers smiled too tightly. Students whispered too loudly. Devon was back. His father had returned to the donors board after the controversy. When Amara passed him in the hall, he smirked. Back where you belong, huh? She didn't respond. She just kept walking, her fingers curling into fists inside her pockets. At lunch, the headmaster's assistant found her. Principal Hardin would like to see you. His office smelled of coffee and varnish. He gestured for her to sit. Amara, he began in his smooth, practiced tone. I want to start by saying how impressed we are with your perseverance. Not every student could handle what you've been through. She stared at him, silent. He continued. Now, I know there's been a lot of noise surrounding your story. Social media, journalists, public figures. It's been overwhelming for everyone. But Lockridge believes in moving forward, in healing. He slid a second copy of the letter across the desk. This scholarship would ensure you a full education here. No more disruptions, no more distractions, just a stable future. Amara looked down at the paper. The words blurred together. No more tournaments, she murmured. He smiled politely. Chess is a wonderful hobby, but your energy should be focused on academics. You're bright enough to do anything. I love chess, she said quietly.
I know, he replied, still smiling. But sometimes we have to let go of what divides us in order to grow.
Her jaw tightened. So you mean stop playing to make you comfortable? The smile flickered. Just for a second. I mean, choose wisely. When she left his office, the walls of the school seemed to press closer. Every step echoed down the polished hallways like a countdown. That evening, she sat with the letter again. Rosa had placed it on the table beside a plate of arroz con pollo that had gone cold. I can't keep cleaning those floors if you lose your place there, Rosa said softly. I can't risk our only chance at something better. Amara swallowed hard. You always tell me not to let them silence me. Rosa's voice cracked. And I meant it. But I also need to know you'll eat. Miss Ellison was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I lost a student once because I told her to play it safe. She took the safe path, and she's still invisible. Sometimes the safer choice burns slower, but it burns all the same. Amara looked from one woman to the other, the mother who had given up everything to clean other people's dreams, and the teacher who had risked her career to protect hers. Then she stood. I'm not signing it. Rosa's breath caught. Amara. If I sign it, they win. They get to say I agreed I didn't belong. They get to make me small again. Tears welled in Rosa's eyes. They'll make you pay for that. Amara's voice was steady. Then I'll pay. The next morning, when she arrived at school, her name had been removed from the morning bulletin. Her photo, once used for a diversity spotlight in the hallway, was gone. No one said a word, but the message was clear. At noon, she was called into the auditorium for a special assembly. She didn't know why, until she saw the podium. The stage lights were bright, the seats packed with students, faculty, and a handful of reporters. Principal Hardin stood at the mic, smiling his polished smile. Today, he announced, we celebrate resilience. A story of second chances and reconciliation. Behind him, a banner read Lockridge Scholarship Initiative. Amara froze. Hardin gestured toward her. Please welcome our very own Amara Alvarez, recipient of our full scholarship for continued excellence. The applause was polite, hesitant. Cameras flashed. Miss Ellison, sitting near the back, felt her stomach twist. She hadn't known. Rosa sat beside her, her face pale. She didn't sign, she whispered. Amara climbed the steps slowly, her heart pounding in her ears. She could see the letter waiting on the podium. One more time, her name typed neatly across the top. The microphone hissed softly as she stood before it. Hardin handed her a pen. Your future begins with this signature, he said, smiling for the cameras. Amara looked out at the sea of faces. The students who'd ignored her, the teachers who doubted her, the journalists waiting for a headline. She thought of Avery's words. No one can silence this kind of mind. And she thought of her mother, who'd been silenced her entire life by the sound of other people's comfort. She picked up the pen. The room went still. Then, slowly, she uncapped it and placed it back on the podium. I don't need your scholarship, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried, I just need my right to be heard. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Principal Hardin's smile stiffened. Amara, perhaps we should. But she wasn't finished. You taught me that silence keeps the peace. But peace built on fear isn't peace. It's control. She turned toward the audience. You can't offer me safety for my silence. Because if I stop speaking, I stop existing. Then she stepped back, her chin high, her voice trembling but unbroken. And so did Amara, when she stood on the podium and made her choice. The courtroom was hushed when Miss Ellison approached the stand. Her blazer was pressed. Her silver hair caught the light. She paused before speaking, gathering resolve. The air felt charged, as though decades of unspoken history were waiting in the room for her voice to free them. The opposing counsel began by trying to frame her as overzealous. You were suspended from your position, Miss Ellison. Wouldn't that undermine your credibility? They asked. She looked calm, measured. I was suspended for defending a student. That doesn't change what I observed. Then she released the records she'd been holding for years, the ones no one else dared speak aloud. She played audio recordings from faculty meetings, where administrators discussed handling students of lower socioeconomic status, and the language was subtle but sharp. Image, reputation, filtering, optics. The room's stillness deepened as listeners realized the weight of what they were hearing. Next came emails. She submitted a chain between the director of admissions and the principal, with lines redacted, discussing how to limit non-legacy entries and how certain children create more noise than value. The words felt cold, shocking. Some parents in the gallery shifted in their seats. A few covered mouths. The counsel tried to object irrelevant, inadmissible, hearsay, but the judge overruled repeatedly. This was not a matter of hearsay. It was corporate culture laid bare. Miss Ellison then presented a list of complaints filed by students over the years. Black students ignored, quietly pushed out, denied scholarships, told to transfer, told not to overreach. Most had been dismissed, some labeled relational problems, some attitude issues, all buried. One former student, now an adult, sat in the gallery and sobbed quietly when her name was read. They told me I was too loud, that I was too ambitious. That single sentence rippled through the courtroom. The cross-examination that followed attempted to discredit her motives. You've become an advocate. Aren't you biased? Could you have ignored your emotional connection to this case? But each attempt fell flat. She'd anticipated them. She answered plainly, "If caring is a bias, then I accept it." The judge nodded slightly. The strength in her composure changed the tenor of the room permanently. Then came a moment no one expected. The defense called a surprise witness, a board member, Miss Carly Hume, who had sent a cryptic email to Hardin years before, about students who don't fit the aesthetic. The defense tried to shield her name, but Miss Ellison's attorneys demanded to see the original. Hume, sitting under oath, was asked, "Did you communicate about excluding students based on background or image?" She paused, glancing down at the document in her hand. The courtroom held its breath. She looked up and said, quietly, "Yes, I regret it now, but at the time I felt pressured to preserve the school's brand. I said things I should never have said." Murmurs ran through the gallery. Her admission opened a crack no defense could fully seal. After Hume's testimony, something strange happened. The defense tried to bring their own records, internal memos, HR files, student evaluations, to counter the narrative. They called a data analyst, whose charts tried to show neutral distributions. But Miss Ellison's counsel anticipated this. They brought in contrasts, a map of funded opportunities versus student demographics, side-by-side comparisons of internal versus external awards, glaring statistical disparities. The weight of numbers became another type of voice. By the end of the day, the judge recessed and the room emptied slowly. Journalists swarmed the hallways. The air was thick with charged possibility. But what nobody expected was the twist that followed. Late that evening, Rosa received a call from the courthouse. The clerk's voice was tremulous. "Mrs. Alvarez, I'm sorry to bother you so late, but we misfiled one of your daughter's deposition requests. You have the right to read it before it goes public. Please come tomorrow." Rosa's heart hammered. That night, she lay awake, turning it over in her mind. Misfiled? No. She sensed a trap. The next morning, the gallery was full. Reporters leaned forward. Cameras clicked. Rosa walked to the stand. The courtroom hush deepened. When she began to speak, the only sound was her breathing. But when Rosa took the stand, the room fell completely silent. The morning of the final public match dawned quiet. Too quiet. The venue, a renovated auditorium in the city's civic center, loomed in the pale light, its glass facade reflecting a gray sky, banners announcing championship finals. Amara Alvarez versus Devin Markham hung from the balconies. Media crews with cameras and drones lined the aisles. Reporters whispered in clusters. Fans wore t-shirts with her name. Allies held signs reading "Let her win," and "Silence won't speak for us." Inside the backstage area, Amara stood at a small folding table, assembling her pieces. She looked at each one, pawn, knight, bishop, as though greeting old friends. Avery Coates and Miss Ellison flanked her. Rosa hovered behind them, silent but steady. Her hand brushed Amara's shoulder. "You ready?" Miss Ellison asked in a low voice. Amara didn't nod. She just lifted her chin. "I think so." They walked to the stage. The lights dimmed. The announcer's voice echoed in the hall. Cameras swiveled. Broadcast monitors showed her face flanked by logos and ticker text. Underdog story of the decade. Maid's daughter shatters expectation. Devin was already at his seat. His father, Bradley Markham, stood at the edge of the stage. He glanced at Amara, expression hard. The sense of tension in the room was electric. As the match began, silence weighed on the audience. No claps, no chatter. Every move was a statement. Amara opened with the Catalan, a slow, strategic choice that leaned on positional strength rather than flashy attacks. Devin countered, pushing to destabilize her early. But Amara remained calm. She moved pieces with deliberate purpose. She anticipated his threats. She engineered subtle imbalances. By move 12, she had quietly centralized her knights. By move 17, she trapped one of Devon's bishops on the rim. The commentators' voices whispered across live feed. She's controlling the tempo. Look at that foresight. He didn't expect this line. At move 22, Devon launched a sudden exchange sacrifice, shocking the in-hall crowd and triggering gasps. But Amara had seen it. She declined some trades, rerouted her pieces, and shifted the center. Half the world watched through screens. Millions streamed online. News tickers ran. Historic match unfolds. A prodigy in full view. She isn't just playing chess, she's redefining the game. At move 28, she exchanged queens under pressure. A bold choice. The room tensed. It was a risk. She left herself vulnerable. But she trusted the structure she'd built. Devon's clock ticked faster. His breathing sharpened. He made a misstep. He overlooked a latent pin threatening his king's flank. Amara pounced. She moved her rook into position. The pin coalesced into a forced line. His defense crumbled. Checkmate. The final move echoed. The board spoke louder than any voice in the room. For a moment, no one moved. Then the crowd rose. Cameras flashed. The roar swallowed the auditorium. She stood, face serene, absorbing the reaction. Reporters surged forward. The judge stood and raised her hand. The screen behind her displayed the final position. Amara's rook dominating, her knights protecting key squares. Devon's king boxed in. When the cheers subsided, the announcer's voice cut through. Champion. Amara Alvarez. Rosa rushed forward, tears streaming. Miss Ellison fought to hold back emotion. Avery's eyes glinted with pride and tears. But it wasn't just a win. It was a reckoning. Reporters pressed her. How do you feel? She said only. Seen. Then she looked across the hall at the board. The same kind of board she once touched in an empty classroom. Unloved. Silent. Her voice rose, soft but clear. Broadcast across media, and into living rooms. No one can silence this kind of mind. At that moment, a hush fell over the auditorium. The crowd, the cameras, the lights, all paused. In that silence, her win became a mirror held up to the world. She stepped off the stage, surrounded by supporters. Students of color reached out to touch her sleeve. Parents hugged her mother. Teachers and staff who once ignored her now bowed their heads in respect. Awkward, belated. But as she passed through the crowd, a protester held up a sign. What about them? He shouted, how many others like her are being silenced now? Amara froze, then turned to face the man. The question hung in the air. In that charged moment, she realized the board she claimed was never just hers. It belonged to all the unseen, unheard children whose potential had been hidden by walls, silence, and bias. As lights flashed and phones recorded, one question echoed louder than applause. How many other prodigies are still being ignored? No child should ever be punished for shining too brightly in a world that refuses to see them. Her story isn't rare, it's just finally been heard. If you believe every voice deserves a chance, type yes. If this broke your heart, subscribe to keep these stories alive. The fallout from Amara's speech hit Lockridge Prep like a silent explosion. There was no shouting in the hallways, no dramatic scene, no fire alarm to warn anyone. Just a ripple that grew and grew, until it cracked the marble veneer of everything the school had built its name upon. By the next morning, social media was flooded with clips from the assembly. Someone in the audience had recorded the entire thing on their phone. Amara's trembling voice, the stunned faces, the single sentence that echoed louder than any announcement ever made at Lockridge. You can't offer me safety for my silence. Because if I stop speaking, I stop existing. That clip traveled faster than the school could contain it. Within hours, national education forums picked it up. Then morning talk shows, then the evening news. Commentators called her the girl who said no. Activists called her a spark. The school board called an emergency meeting. And quietly, beneath all that noise, a new group of people began to move. People who understood that what had happened wasn't just immoral, it was illegal. Miss Ellison was the first to contact them. She'd kept every file, every email, every timestamp, and every note. The footage of Amara being accused, the withdrawal of her name from official tournaments, the memo threatening her mother's employment, all of evidence that told a story far bigger than one girl and one chessboard. She called Rosa one night, after the story broke nationally. They'll try to bury this under apologies, she said. You can't let them. Rosa's voice trembled on the other end. I'm a janitor, Margaret. I don't even know where to start. I do, Miss Ellison said. I know people who've fought this kind of thing before. Within a week, the Alvarez family met with a civil rights lawyer named Dana Wexler, a calm, sharp-eyed woman who had spent her career suing public institutions that confused privilege for merit. She'd read about Amara's story online and had already been gathering notes before Rosa even called. In the small conference room of Wexler and Bloom, Amara sat beside her mother while Miss Ellison laid out folders across the table. Dana adjusted her glasses. We're not just talking about defamation or suspension, she said. This is discrimination, emotional damage, educational suppression. They punished her for being exceptional in the wrong skin, in the wrong class. Rosa swallowed hard. Will they fight back? Dana gave a wry smile. Oh, absolutely. But that's when they make mistakes. The first press release from Wexler's firm landed like a thunderclap across the district.
Alvarez v. Lockridge Preparatory Academy, and Principal Douglas Hardin. Civil Action Number 2025 CV01783. Filed in the Southern District Court for violations of equal protection, racial discrimination, and retaliation against a minor student.
The community went wild. Some parents cheered. Others fumed. Comment sections split into war zones. Donations poured into a GoFundMe launched by supporters who called it the Right to Think case. Inside Lockridge, fear turned to panic. Teachers were instructed not to comment. Emails were monitored. Even students received communication guidelines. But kids talk, especially when they smell hypocrisy. Whispers filled the cafeteria. She's suing the school. My mom says her lawyer's famous. Hardin's done. Hardin wasn't done. Not yet. Behind closed doors, he rallied the board. He blamed Miss Ellison for instigating unrest. He blamed Rosa for unprofessional conduct. And he framed Amara as a misguided child manipulated by outside activists. But what he didn't know was that the case had already outgrown him. Dana and her legal team began collecting testimony from former staff and students. One by one, people who had once stayed silent came forward. A former janitor recalled being told to keep the help's children away from classrooms. A retired teacher confessed that the administration filtered scholarship applicants by last name. Each story was another brick in the wall closing in around the school. The local paper ran a front-page headline. Discrimination in the halls of excellence? Reporters camped outside Lockridge. Cameras followed Rosa to work. Students whispered about the trial. Amara tried to live normally, but normal no longer existed. She studied at home now, away from the school that had once refused to see her. Avery Coates still trained her twice a week, preparing her for a new tournament circuit that was now international. You're not just playing chess anymore, Avery told her one afternoon as they reviewed endgames. You're teaching the world to see the board. Amara glanced at the clock on the wall. Do you think I'm ready? Avery smiled faintly. You already were. They just weren't ready for you. Meanwhile, Hardin's composure was cracking. His once polished press statements started to sound brittle. Board members whispered about his leadership fatigue. Behind his back, some even called him a liability. Then came the depositions. In the courthouse downtown, under bright white lights, the truth began to unfold like a slow, painful autopsy. Rosa sat in one room, hands trembling, as the opposing counsel asked cruel, condescending questions. You understand that your daughter was not a registered student? Yes. So technically, she wasn't entitled to academic opportunities. She was entitled to fairness. But you admit she entered a restricted area? I admit she wanted to learn. Every answer Rosa gave was steady. Her quiet dignity was its own kind of defiance. When it was Miss Ellison's turn, the lawyers tried to discredit her too.
You were suspended for misconduct, correct?
For defending a child. Isn't it true you acted outside your professional scope? I acted inside my moral one. Each time they tried to twist her words, she straightened her back and met their eyes. Amara testified last. The courtroom went still when she spoke. Her voice was soft but surgical. They said I couldn't be in the club because I wasn't a student. Then they said I couldn't be a student because I was the janitor's daughter. I didn't know which one I was supposed to stop being. Even the stenographer looked up for a moment. That night, clips of her testimony hit national news. The hashtag Amara Speaks trended worldwide. The next day, 3 former students, now adults, contacted Dana's firm. Each had their own version of the same story. Racial profiling, scholarship rejections, image management. One even produced an email thread signed by Hardin himself, discussing optics related to black scholarship applicants. That was the twist the district hadn't prepared for. Dana's office leaked it strategically. The press headline the next morning read, Principal Hardin accused of optics filtering in student selection process. Parents flooded the district office with calls. A protest formed outside Lockridge's front gates. Students holding handmade signs. Let her think. Equal minds. Equal chances. No more silence. Inside, Hardin slammed his office door. He called the district superintendent. This has gone too far. I need a statement drafted immediately. Something that clears this up. The superintendent's voice was cold. You're on administrative leave, Doug. Effective immediately. He froze. You can't. But the line went dead. In another part of the city, Rosa and Amara sat together watching the news. The anchor's voice echoed through their small living room. After weeks of mounting evidence, the Lockridge Board of Education has placed Principal Douglas Hardin on leave pending investigation. Civil rights attorneys say this case could redefine how private institutions are held accountable for racial discrimination. Rosa turned to her daughter, tears in her eyes. They finally see it. Amara shook her head slowly. They finally can't ignore it. Outside their window, a small group of neighborhood kids were drawing chessboards in chalk on the sidewalk. When they finished, one of them wrote beside it, "Play bold." Amara smiled for the first time in weeks. But as Dana reviewed the court documents later that night, her brow furrowed. There was something buried in the deposition transcripts. Something odd. Multiple witnesses, when pressed about decision-making, kept referring back to one person. One signature, one voice behind every rejection, every barrier, every convenient excuse. She flipped through the pages again, the same name appearing again and again like a watermark. Principal Douglas Hardin. The depositions began, and one name kept coming up. Principal Hardin.